everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Group Chat of the Dead. Chapter 72 to 78. Impure World reincarnated group friends return to the world, Obito's ending for K5 in an instant, a rustling stir swept through the dense forest. Uchiha Obito snapped out of his reverie, that soft, gentle voice had lulled him somewhere he hadn't meant to go, and his gaze cut sharply across his surroundings. Who's there? But then, that same gentle voice drifted back into his ears, laced with faint puzzlement, and pulled him right back under. Ah, you still can't figure out what it is you truly want, can you? So the gentle voice continued, smooth and accommodating. What you want is simply for her to come back, isn't it? As long as she returns, nothing else really matters, does it? Obito's throat worked. He was just about to say something, when, in the very next instant, he felt it with crystalline clarity, the sharp, stabbing pain of a kunai driving into the back of his heart. In that instant, Obito's pupils contracted to pinpoints. He spun around on instinct, no one there. Then, almost immediately, his hand flew back to feel the kunai buried in him. As he wrenched it free, he caught it in the corner of his eye, and on that kunai, he saw a seal formula achingly, bone-deep familiar. But how is this possible? No, wait. If this is actually happening, then the next step should be. He didn't even have time to finish the thought. On pure reflex, Obito moved to throw the kunai away, even knowing full well it was already too late. And then, from somewhere deep in the distant forest, he heard a voice ring out. Za Warudo. Uchiha Obito. Hold on, something about that seems. But in the very next instant, even that half-formed thought ground to a halt. The gears of the world locked into place, manifesting behind Jonathan. He vaulted from the underbrush at Obito's side, and the world behind him threw its full strength into a punch aimed squarely at Uchiha Obito. The world, rendered in black and white, held for a full, agonizing 5 seconds before it declared itself done. The moment time stop ended, Obito's consciousness finally snapped back into his own body. His eyes flew wide. He coughed up a mouthful of blood. Who is this? He wrenched his head up, and when he saw the handsome blue-haired young man standing before him, his face went blank with stunned confusion. This guy, when did he get here? Wait, no, don't get distracted. I still have something in my hand, I need to dash. You still haven't answered my question, you know. The gentle voice whispered at Uchiha Obito's ear once more. In the next heartbeat, Obito's thoughts scattered again, brief but total. And so in that instant, the flying Raijin activates. Obito's eyes blew wide. Inches from his face, the face that nearly stopped his breath, was Namake's Minato, right there. Namake's Minato. But no, impossible, he already used the dead demon-consuming seal, that forbidden technique, he's supposed to be gone. Why is he here? Uchiha Obito. Namake's Minato looked at the man who had once been his student. After a long, long moment, he let out a slow, heavy breath. So it really came to this in the end. An even deeper horror than before rose in Uchiha Obito's chest. This shouldn't be. Why does Minato know his name? How could he possibly recognize him? But Namake's Minato was clearly not about to give Uchiha Obito any extra time to think. The moment the flying Raijin had activated, Minato's hands had already begun spinning a Rasengan into existence. That Rasengan drove straight into Uchiha Obito's abdomen. No time to work it out. That thought flashed through Obito's mind, and on pure instinct he moved to activate Kamui. His body phased toward intangibility almost at once, beginning its shift into Kamui's dimensional pocket. Without any interference, he would have slipped free of that hit with ease. If without any interference. Finally, Anthony murmured from the undergrowth, watching it all unfold, that one thought surfacing in his chest. Then, without even needing a reminder, because they had planned this out long in advance, Jia extended her hand. As a massive flood of points drained from Anthony's account, she drew a quiet, clean stroke through the empty air with her blade, and the very concept of Camus's dimensional pocket was briefly, entirely erased. It lasted only an instant. But the color behind the mask on Obito's face shifted again. How Kamui's transfer, it's like it lost its destination. But if that's true, then that means. As if to answer the thought forming in Obito's mind, the Rasengan crashed into his abdomen at that exact moment. A direct, devastating hit. Namake's Minato looked at his former student. Finally, he exhaled. Just wait, Obito. What happened with the 9 tails, that is unforgivable. But the one who led you down this path. He paused. As your teacher, I will deal with them too. No matter what it takes. He spoke and drew his kunai, preparing to deliver the final strike, when Uchiha Obito suddenly raised his head. He tried to activate Kamui again. I have to find a way to run. In that moment, only one thought remained in Uchiha Obito's mind. He even briefly blocked out the gentle female voice sighing endlessly in his ear. He could feel his connection to Kamui's dimensional pocket slowly returning. If he could just get there, he could escape. Sensei has been revived, reason unknown. This is significant. It could have an enormous impact on the plan going forward. I need to deal with this somehow. A storm of unanswered questions churned inside him, but in this moment, he had exactly one goal. The only one who couldn't stand it anymore was Carmen, buzzing away in Obito's ear. She had been sighing at him for ages. At this point she was starting to genuinely wonder if Uchiha Obito was simply blind. Would it kill you to take one more look? That dimensional pocket you're so desperately trying to flee into, is it actually Kamui's space? Would it hurt you to look twice? And then, as if in answer to Carmen's exasperation, the gateway to that dimensional pocket swung open before Uchiha Obito, like the gates of heaven thrown wide. But behind that gate, there was a ghost sitting on a toilet, holding a fishing rod, gazing at Obito with an expression brimming with excitement and delight. Hey, you finally took the bait, huh? And with that, grinning from ear to ear, the ghost stood up from the toilet, turned slightly sideways, and gave a little bow. One VIP guest, right this way into the primordial river. Without giving Obito any say in the matter whatsoever, the gate pulled Uchiha Obito inside. And only now, only in this moment, did Uchiha Obito finally grasp the truth of the situation. This was no Kamui space. This place was an absolute dump. Staring at the swirling, prismatic currents of the primordial river before him, and the ferocious torrents all around him, roaring and churning, and already eating into his body and his will, Uchiha Obito's eyes went wide. What the hell is this place? Why did Kamui connect here? And so, just like that, Uchiha Obito, dumped into the primordial river by Anthony, began to struggle with everything he had. On the bank above, Anthony and Carmen, one man and one ghost woman, stood and watched the fool thrashing around in the current below. In truth, pulling off what had just happened was remarkably simple. After all, entering a dimensional pocket is, when you strip it down, functionally identical to teleportation. And if it's a teleportation, well, Anthony had quite a bit to say about that. By using his soul strength, now as high as 14, to reach into the teleportation formula, and under the twin conditions of Jia, having already briefly erased the concept of Kamui's pocket and Obito having been critically wounded by Minato, Anthony simply cast his fishing line and hooked Uchiha Obito in. From there, it was just a matter of disrupting the teleportation mid-transit, and leveraging his deep, overwhelming connection to the primordial river, redirecting the destination here. You like popping open portals in front of people? Sure, maybe your phased-out body is immune to physical attacks, but the angler can still hook your soul, can't he? While Obito bobbed along behind the Styx boat, Carmen turned her head and looked at Anthony. Then she looked away again. You already have a plan in mind, don't you? She said it, and Anthony nodded with an air of calm that was almost too relaxed. I'll give this one a relatively complete ending. Then I'll head back and report to Minato. Once this is wrapped up, I'm going back to the lab. Waiting to see if Ein recognizes you. Whether he even can at this point is still an open question. Carmen let out a quiet sigh, didn't bother rising to Anthony's teasing, gave a wave of her hand, and her spectral form vanished where she stood. Anthony, alone now, watched Uchiha Obito below, and as he felt the river working the moon over quite thoroughly, something quietly reflective stirred in him. He had to hand it to the primordial river. That thing had force. As a soul who'd been weathering its currents day in and day out for who knew how long, Anthony understood better than anyone just how powerful the river's erosion really was. He survived here on a trickle of soul energy each day, and that was only possible because of the group chat's divine protection plus the river essentially treating him like a favored child. Any outsider who fell in without those advantages, the river would give them a very personal demonstration of what torn apart atom by atom felt like. Still, checking the time in his head, it was probably about right. With that thought, Anthony gripped his fishing rod and swept it downward. The line caught Uchiha Obito and slowly reeled him up. Behind Anthony, the primordial furnace let out a low, resonant roar. Your. When Uchiha Obito opened his eyes, he found the ghost from before watching him. For a moment he could only stare blankly. I'm your great-uncle's third cousin's brother's nephew on the paternal side. Anthony raised an eyebrow, then said with great enthusiasm, You don't remember me? Watching the bewilderment deepen on Obito's face, Anthony laughed twice more, but then, his expression slowly, steadily settled into something serious. Forget it. On reflection, there's not much I need to explain to you anyway. He paused briefly, then pointed at the primordial furnace off to the side, considered for a moment and spoke. The river didn't wash your memory away, did it? Uchiha Madara, do you still remember him? In an instant, Obito's eyes went wide behind his mask. He stared at Anthony, poured everything he had into trying to activate Kemi again, or throw some ninjutsu, anything, but this space refused him. The primordial river, in its singularly savage way, rejected every outside force that didn't belong here. Every scrap of power he reached for moved not even a hair's breadth. He's just using you to serve his own ends. Though to be fair from your perspective, I'm probably not much better. Anthony spoke without urgency, then partway through caught himself, changed direction, and Uchiha Obito stared at him, lost. What exactly are you trying to say? I'm only saying this, I know your future. I know your past. Uchiha Obito, if you follow Uchiha Madara, you will end up with nothing. Betrayed at the end, stripped of everything. A tool and nothing more. But to avoid that outcome, there is another path open to you. As Anthony spoke, the primordial furnace roared again behind him. Uchiha Obito's pupils contracted slightly, and before his eyes, soul flames began to rise and burn. Then those flames began to char his spirit and flesh alike. Soul forging begins. Anthony's tone remained unhurried. I'm not like Uchiha Madara. I'm a man who keeps his word, more or less, so at minimum, I will find a way to bring Rin back to life. There's a chance you'll even get to see her again someday, that much I can at least dangle in front of you as a possibility. But as for the sins you've already committed. Anthony was quiet for a beat, then gave a small smile. It wouldn't be my place to say this, but someone still has to pay for them, doesn't it? And so, a soul already ground down by the primordial river was fed, once more, into the primordial furnace's grinding. Soul forging began in an instant, then ceased with a thundering groan from the furnace. When roughly 10 minutes had passed, Anthony waved his hand, and a test tube appeared in his palm. You have obtained Hashirama cell compound. Recycle value, 36,577 points. High energy material, elevated recycle weight. You have obtained Mangekyo Sharingan. You have obtained. Anthony did a quick scan, then traded everything except the Hashirama cells for points. In an instant, his balance, which had taken quite a hit, swelled back, landing at roughly 210,000. Farming one shadow rank target in the Naruto world really does pay out. He sighed wistfully. Shame there aren't many people as loaded as Uchiha Obito left. Though it did make him kind of curious, if he ever managed to melt down Uchiha Madara, how many points would that yield? Don't let your thoughts slide that far down the slope. He reined his mind back in. The matter of reviving Rin, he was actually planning to try. Partly because even if he didn't, Namake's Minato would almost certainly have that hope himself. And besides, even though Uchiha Obito had been melted down, Anthony had kept the barest sliver of his soul in reserve, just in case he needed it later. If the day ever came when it was useful, dangle Rin like a carrot in front of a horse, and that would be a remarkably effective leash. Something to consider once he had more resources. As for the toilet situation, the current angler's throne was temporarily at capacity. The two souls already inside were showing signs of something resembling diminishing returns, which Anthony found a little painful to look at. He'd wait until the next one was built before thinking about adding anyone else. Probably not too far off, honestly. Finally, Anthony pulled his thoughts together and opened the group chat. Lord of the White Holy Throne, okay, I've wrapped up on my end. Lord of the White Holy Throne, good work, everyone. That's a wrap on our first team outing. Unless anyone feels like sticking around to sightsee, you're free to head back to your respective worlds. As those words left him, a quiet flicker of anticipation rose in Anthony's chest. Right then. The primary objective was now resolved. What came next was for everyone, each freshly reanimated across their separate worlds, to return home and face whatever awaited them there. Even Anthony found himself genuinely curious about what was going to happen next. At the same time, he couldn't help but type something into the group chat, tagging Himmel out of sheer curiosity. Lord of the White Holy Throne at Friaran's Warrior of the Twilight Age. Hey, by the way, did you manage to eat well this round? Friaran's Warrior of the Twilight Age. Friaran's Warrior of the Twilight Age, what kind of thing is that to say? Lord of the White Holy Throne, ahem, ahem. Never mind that for now, I'm going to go sort out the follow-up business here in the Naruto world with Minato. I'll check in later to see how everyone's reanimation is playing out back in their home worlds. Lord of the White Holy Throne, keep at it, everyone. After typing out that last string of messages, Anthony let out a long, slow breath. Right then. First up, start with Namake's Minato. Went more. Walnut-chan New History, Arknight's Enfield, picked up a Gugagaga. Let's reach these milestones together. 100 Power Stones equals +1 free chapter for all readers. Chapter 73, Minato, Naruto, on your ring grandpa. 2,561 words. When the sun rose the next morning, Sarutobi Hiruzen set down what he'd been holding, looked at the stack of documents piled before him, and worked his aching wrist in slow circles. Without noticing, a very long time seemed to have passed again. That thought drifted through Hiruzen's mind unbidden. He soon decided he'd take a few minutes rest and come back to the paperwork later. And so, naturally, his thoughts began to wander, drifting to the contents of the reports sitting in that pile. Come to think of it, if Hiruzen was remembering correctly, wasn't someone supposed to visit today? He mulled it over for a moment, then fished one document out from the stack and pulled it free to look at it. His memory was right. Someone from outside Konoha had submitted a request to meet with the third Hokage. After multiple rounds of verification and review, the request had ultimately been approved. If he did the math, the time should be just about now. It took him a while to sort through his memories and get everything straight, and in doing so, he found himself sinking into a sigh. If he was being honest, there hadn't been a single day during times like these when he didn't miss Namake's Minato. He was old. Old enough that some things were simply beyond him now. Minato had been so young. And yet, young in a way that was heartbreakingly unfair. Hiruzen let out a long breath and cleared the thought away. At precisely that moment, a knock came at the door. Without much hesitation, Hiruzen called out. The door swung slowly open, and a young man with golden hair and green eyes walked in, a smile on his face. Hello, third Hokage. Hiruzen gave a small nod. You must be Mr. What brings you here? Anthony didn't answer right away. He paused for a brief moment, then slid a ring off his finger and held it flat in his palm. If I explained my situation in my own words, it might come across as a little hard to believe. So I think I'll let the facts speak for themselves. Third Hokage, sir, I've come to discuss a partnership. And what follows is my way of demonstrating good faith, and offering a little help that comes from friendship. Having said that, he took one step back. In the next instant, a golden radiance began to flow across the surface of the ring. Hiruzen's guard snapped up on instinct, but then, in the very next moment, that familiar figure appeared before him, and every movement stopped. He went utterly still, rooted to the spot. Minato. The words came out barely above a murmur, near disbelief in his voice, as Hiruzen stared at the young man with yellow hair standing before him, his form somehow translucent, and yet unmistakably, impossibly familiar. Then he watched the translucent Namikaze Minato's face break into a helpless smile. Third Hokage. He said softly, I'm back. As Hiruzen lurched to his feet, his elbow caught the glass orb on the desk and sent it tumbling to the floor. But Hiruzen had no attention left for that. His eyes were wide, fixed on Namikaze Minato. His gaze darted back and forth between Anthony standing to the side and Minato, until Anthony took another quiet step back and said simply, you two talk. The moment those words left his mouth, Hiruzen's questions came pouring out at Minato. Minato, what's your situation right now? His voice carried a slight tremor, excitement, maybe, or something close to it, along with a thread of doubt and curiosity. Namikaze Minato gathered his thoughts, then spoke, more or less halfway resurrected, I'd say. Thanks to the person standing beside you. He's a friend of mine. He paused briefly. Anthony, reading the cue, quietly fed him a trickle of soul energy, and Minato converted a portion of it into chakra. That should be enough to prove who I am. He raised his head and looked at Hiruzen, and saw the old man's expression sharpen with sudden focus. Then Hiruzen stepped forward. He reached out as if to grasp Minato's hand, but his fingers passed right through the soul form. Minato blinked, startled. Hiruzen, however, seemed not to care in the slightest, and called out loudly, halfway resurrected, what does that mean? You didn't die in the Ninetales incident. That's wonderful. When did you start getting better? When will you be completely better? When can you come back as the fourth Hokage? The village has hope again. Listening to that rapid-fire string of questions, which were, frankly, a little personal, Minato stood there in a daze for a good few seconds. It was Anthony who stepped in with two quiet coughs and spoke up, allow me to answer those questions, third Hokage, sir. You just got a sense of Minato's condition yourself. He has been resurrected, but not completely. To be precise, his physical anchor right now is this ring. Anthony said this as he pointed to the ring on his hand. Hiruzen looked at it, and a flicker of disappointment crossed his face. So he can't just spring back to life and handle village paperwork immediately. Watching Hiruzen school his expression back into something more composed, and doing it quite quickly, Anthony's eye twitched slightly. He pressed on, I understand your feelings, third Hokage. But his situation still has a few small complications. Small complications. That was putting it mildly. Anthony's own head was starting to ache just thinking about it. Getting Namikaze Minato properly resurrected required satisfying at least two conditions. The first was a hard requirement, find a way to kill the Shinigami. The problem was that thing had gotten smart. Or rather, after being honey-trapped by Anthony once, the Shinigami had apparently developed full-blown PTSD, and Anthony was fairly sure the same trick wouldn't work a second time. So the Shinigami problem was stuck in a deadlock for now. The second was a softer condition, deal with every hidden threat, Black Zetsu and all. Because if Minato actually came back for real, the fallout would be enormous. Obito was already dead. If Minato resurrected on top of that and Black Zetsu got desperate and did something rash, Anthony genuinely couldn't predict where things would spiral. Better to wait until he had the power to flush Black Zetsu down a toilet before resurrecting Minato. That was the safer call. With that thought, Anthony looked back toward Hiruzen, who was already leaning forward with barely concealed urgency. So when can he actually come back? It'll just take a little more time. Please be patient. Don't worry, you'll still have the chance to retire. Going by the current pace, a few months at most. Please look forward to it. Anthony pulled a rough estimate out of thin air and delivered it with a smile. With the group chat as his engine for growth, a few months was a timeframe he was still fairly confident about. All right. Something in Hiruzen's expression seemed to ease. He thought for a moment, then said, "Very well. And this partnership you mentioned? We can hammer that out one-on-one in a bit." Anthony said, then glanced at Namikaze Minato, let out a small sigh, and added, "But before that, don't you think there's something important we should take care of first? Something that matters a great deal to a certain someone." And so, in the next moment, the two of them turned in unison to look at Namikaze Minato, and the ring sitting beneath him. The rest of it, needless to say, was wrapped up easily and pleasantly from there. Hiruzen hadn't lost his wits on this one, he and Anthony came to an understanding fast. Before getting down to business, the host had to make the guest feel welcome. So they took care of Minato's matter first. The ring was quietly arranged to be escorted in secret to Uzumaki Naruto's side. On one hand, it would give Naruto a bit of extra protection. On the other, it would give Minato a chance to see his child. As for whether to reveal who he really was, that was entirely Minato's call. Anthony mentioned it to him once, then left it alone. After that, Anthony got down to negotiating the partnership with Hiruzen. To call it a partnership was a bit grand, honestly. The truth was that on his way over, Anthony had been thinking that he was maybe a little short on cash, so why not squeeze out another haul while he was at it? Now that he had the Minato resurrection to leverage, he could haggle with Hiruzen a bit, see if he could borrow some resources from Konoha's side. In the end, after a back-and-forth negotiation that left both parties thoroughly exhausted, Anthony managed to scrape together just over 30,000 points worth of credit from Konoha. Adding that to the points David and the two souls in the toilet had been racking up over these past few days, Anthony's total was sitting at roughly 250,000 again. As for what happened next in Konoha, Anthony ran a rough calculation and figured things were more or less on track. There wouldn't be much more juice to squeeze until Minato's full resurrection. The Uchiha clan and Danzo were still good for a bit of extra extraction, though. So Anthony dropped a couple of casual reminders, watch Danzo, and shore up the defenses around Uchiha Shisui. Once he confirmed Hiruzen had taken the hint, he didn't push further. No need to say more than that. If Uchiha Shisui stayed out of trouble, the Uchiha clan massacre could be more or less averted. The remaining piece was just handling Danzo. Honestly, Anthony had his eye on Root. He wasn't sure he could run an organization himself, but that's what Namikaze Minato was for, wasn't it? "I'm just here for the money. I'll handle the earnings. Once you're resurrected, you handle the management. Doesn't that work out perfectly? Find a way to deal with Danzo, then get Shisui to lend a hand." There was no reason taking over Root was out of reach. Of course, all of this had to wait until Minato actually came back. And so, once Anthony confirmed he had no further business in the Hokage's office, he headed back to the River Styx. Meanwhile, the ring that had been sent to Naruto's place was another story entirely. A little later that same morning, Naruto opened his apartment door, grabbed a cup of instant ramen, poured in the hot water, and sat down at his small table. Then his eyes were drawn to a ring sitting in the most prominent spot on the table. "Did I have this on my table yesterday?" Uzumaki Naruto stared at it curiously, scratching his head, completely at a loss. He reached out and gave the ring a tentative poke, and from inside it came a soft rattling sound, like bones assembling and clicking together. Naruto recoiled with a startled yelp and lurched backward, but then a strange voice reached his ears, as if it were speaking directly beside him. "Why hello there, young one. I can see right away that you have extraordinary potential. What kind of terrible script is this?" Inside the ring, Namikaze Minato's soul stared at the lines Anthony had provided for him, the script he was apparently supposed to recite upon first contact, and his expression went very dark, very fast. He had chosen not to reveal his true identity to Uzumaki Naruto right away. On one hand, Naruto was still young, and since his own resurrection wasn't complete, there was a risk Naruto might mention it to someone outside and cause unnecessary trouble. So for now, this disguised voice would have to do. On the other hand, Namake's Minato wanted to save that moment for something more proper. Like when he was fully resurrected. It would be wonderful if Kushina could be there too. Minato's gaze dimmed for just a moment, but he quickly composed himself and looked back at the Uzumaki Naruto in front of him. And then, despite everything, he smiled. "Are you the one talking?" Naruto stared at the ring for a long time before finally working up the nerve to ask. Minato, still speaking through the ring in his slightly altered voice, replied, "I am a soul dwelling within this ring. Since you've had the fortune to find me, I will help you become." Minato thought for a moment, then suddenly laughed. "Do you want to become Hokage?" Through the ring, Minato watched Naruto's eyes light up. And so, smiling to himself, he followed that up with his first real question, "Let me ask you one more thing. Do you want to learn the Flying Thunder God technique? Lord of the White Holy Throne at Konoha's Yellow Flash, how are things going?" Konoha's Yellow Flash, all going smoothly. Naruto's side is settled too. Things should stay on the expected track for a while. Konoha's Yellow Flash, I've got time to kill anyway, so I'll start teaching Naruto some jutsu. First I want to see if we can put the tailed beast chakra to use, then use that chakra volume to train the Rasengan and the Flying Thunder God technique. Lord of the White Holy Throne. Lord of the White Holy Throne, what the hell? That scared me. AAA City Ghost, why is everyone in this group so obsessed with making monsters out of children? Lord of the White Holy Throne, hey, don't say it like that. Don't rush me, I'll head over and craft some gear upgrades for David later. Can't fall behind on the monster raising front. Let Night City burn. David, who was in the middle of hauling in his fishing nets with great effort, typed a question mark, then got a kick from Lucy urging him to keep pulling. Let Night City burn, never mind. Back to fishing. Demon King's strictest father, look at the poor kid, worn to the bone. Lord of the White Holy Throne, labor is glorious. Lord of the White Holy Throne, speaking of which, where's Himmel? Haven't seen him say a word. He's usually always popping in with a line or two. Lord of the White Holy Throne, I'm actually dying of curiosity. I want to know how the love story between him and the radio is going to develop. Friaran's warrior of the Twilight Age, don't rush me. I said don't rush me. Friaran's warrior of the Twilight Age, we're at the critical step right now. Lord of the White Holy Throne. You're actually pulling it off. Friaran's warrior of the Twilight Age, I'm about to see her in person. Lord of the White Holy Throne. Read more, Walnut-chan New History, Samsara Game, starting in the long dark with my waifus help us hit our community goals, 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 74, Himmel, Friaran, I hate that you're a block of wood. 2531 words Lord of the Ivory Throne, what's going on? Is there a stream? Friaran's warrior of the journey's end, let me figure out how to start this thing first. Friaran's warrior of the journey's end has started a stream. Lord of the Ivory Throne has joined the stream. Founder of the Golden Spirit has joined the stream. Demon King's strictest father has joined the stream. Nearly everyone in the group poured into the stream in an instant. Everyone, that is, except for David, who was still out there fishing. You could say it was basically all of them. Meanwhile, Anthony was burning soul flame to extend the length of David's fishing net, while simultaneously clicking into the stream, genuinely curious to see what all the fuss was about. But very quickly, he realized he'd gotten the wrong idea. Inside Himmel's stream, there was nothing but darkness. The screen was pitch black. You couldn't see a thing. Anthony stared at the screen for a good long while, and then, slowly but surely, his expression twisted into the universal look of an old man squinting at his phone on the subway. Lord of the Ivory Throne, okay, but what exactly is the streamer streaming? Where's the picture? Where's the director? AAA City Ghost, seriously, there's nothing here at all. AAA City Ghost. I was actually looking forward to seeing what you were going to do next. Friar's Warrior of the Journey's End. Don't get impatient, the streamer doesn't want this either. Facing the group's barrage of complaints, Himmel was silent for a moment, then typed, Friar's Warrior of the Journey's End. The streamer hasn't stopped streaming, the streamer just can't stream from inside the box. Lord of the Ivory Throne. Grand Flame Wordsmith, so. Himmel is currently inside a box. Lord of the Ivory Throne, wait, how did you even get in there? Friar's Warrior of the Journey's End, crawled and let Night City burn. The moment David joined the stream, he was greeted by an increasingly baffling flood of comments. After absorbing the shock for a second, he quietly chose to exit the stream and return to fishing with his newly upgraded net. Honestly, he could feel it, he was almost about to get something. It had been nearly a full day and night of fishing. There was no way he was going home empty-handed, right? Gazing out at the vast expanse of the primordial river before him, a thought drifted through David's mind, and as for what he'd do if he came up empty again. He'd just keep fishing. Let Night City burn has left the stream. Founder of the Golden Spirit, your situation does seem a little peculiar. But what box is this, exactly? Lord of the Ivory Throne, Friar's treasure chest probably. Friar's Warrior of the Journey's End, yeah, that's the one. Hey wait, I think I can hear something. Along with Himmel's message in the chat, voices began to drift in through the stream, audible from Himmel's perspective, just a moment. Then, with a slow creak, the lid of the treasure chest swung open. On screen, a white-haired elf wearing a scarf peered down into the box from above. She then leaned forward as if she were about to climb in herself, craning her head into the chest, clearly searching for something. At last she retrieved a small potion bottle, and after considerable effort, finally hauled herself back upright. She didn't notice, however, that the Himmelbrand radio had spent its very last reserves of accumulated points to scrape together just enough energy to inch itself out of the chest and onto the floor. And just like that, the whole world opened up. The warm interior of a small wooden cabin came into view on the stream. Anthony glanced at Fern and Friarin in the frame and immediately understood. Ah, so it's this part of the story. Which meant the next bit of dialogue would be, as expected, you know, men, they'll be happy as long as you give them something like this. Friarin held up the potion bottle and said this to Fern. Fern looked at her for a long moment, then couldn't help but let out a quiet sigh. For a moment, she wasn't quite sure what to say. But at the same time, her gaze caught the radio lying on the floor. She hadn't noticed it fall, and she blinked, visibly surprised. Lady Friarin, what's this? She turned around and asked Friarin in her usual composed tone. Friarin paused. She set down the potion, turned her head, and spotted the radio on the floor. She thought about it carefully for a while. I forget. I'm not sure when I put it in there. How strange, why don't I remember? Is it something not particularly important? Anthony lost it watching the stream. AAA City Ghost, Lord of the Ivory Throne, sorry, but that's genuinely a little funny. Friar's Warrior of the Journey's End, hey, what are you laughing at? Founder of the Golden Spirit, not quite the gentlemanly response, but it is admittedly a bit dramatic. Friar's Warrior of the Journey's End at Lord of the Ivory Throne, show some decency. Lord of the Ivory Throne, why aren't you saying that to Carmen? Friar's Warrior of the Journey's End, I simply feel that you are the singular root of all the group's moral decay. Lord of the Ivory Throne, ahem, back to the stream with two small coughs. Anthony refocused his attention on the stream, and watched Friarin's next move. He watched as Friarin picked up the Himmelbrand radio, turned it over and examined it from every angle, and then seemed to sink into thought. She was trying to figure out what kind of contraption this was. And it was at that moment that from inside the radio, a voice suddenly spoke, a voice that made Friarin feel strangely hazy and oddly familiar. Long time no see, Friarin. It was Himmel's voice. Frieren blinked. The slow-witted elf lowered her head and gazed curiously at the radio in her hands. The voice was coming from inside this thing. She tapped the radio with the tip of her staff, but sensed no fluctuation of magical energy whatsoever. After a long moment of deliberation, Frieren finally raised her head and spoke to Fern. It's probably some kind of human trinket. From what I remember, they were always making all sorts of strange little gadgets, some of them were quite interesting. This one looks like it can preserve sound. She said it casually, turning the radio over in her hands as she mused to herself. Something tugged at her heart, lightly, without warning, and was gone just as quickly. So the voice just now was coming from inside it. Fern crouched down beside Frieren and studied the radio together with her. After a moment she asked. That's Himmel. Frieren nodded and said as much, then tilted her head and pondered a little more. Come to think of it, was this something he gave me? If it has his voice in it. But when exactly? I keep trying to remember and I just can't. I never gave you anything. I'm Himmel. I'm right here. Watching Frieren stand up, the Himmelbrand radio went quiet for a beat, and then felt a strange, pins and needles kind of feeling wash over it. Then it called out quickly, oh, it's calling to me. So there's more recorded in here too. Frieren gave a mild nod, eyes drifting downward, as though she were thinking, or perhaps reaching back into some distant memory. A moment later, she stuffed the still-shouting radio back into the chest. She lowered the lid. Then she turned back to Fern and continued, right, I went a bit off track there. Let's get back to the topic of gifts. And with that, the stream went dark again, only the sound of Fern and Frieren's conversation audible now, the picture gone entirely. The chat was silent for a long stretch, until Himmel came back into the room, and sent a single message. Frieren's warrior of the journey's end. Lord of the Ivory Throne, sorry, I really couldn't hold it together that time. Frieren's warrior of the journey's end. Frieren's warrior of the journey's end. Frieren's warrior of the journey's end, isn't this kind of nice, though? The way things are now. AAA City Ghost, is that acceptance? Frieren's warrior of the journey's end, ah. I suppose so. It can't be helped, right? Still, the kind of moment I'm hoping for, there'll be a chance for that someday, won't there? Frieren's warrior of the journey's end, and the way things are now isn't bad either. Once I'm properly resurrected later, she'll definitely recognize me. Frieren's warrior of the journey's end, for now, at least my voice can stay by her side. If it makes even a slightly deeper impression on her, honestly, that's not so bad. Founder of the Golden Spirit, I'm glad you can look at it that way, Mr. Speaking of which, Miss Carmen is also on the reanimation jutsu list, isn't she? Founder of the Golden Spirit, you've been watching the stream this whole time over here, is that all right? AAA City Ghost, it's fine. AAA City Ghost, the person I'm looking for is still busy right now, after all. AAA City Ghost, I'm going to wait a little. Oh, it looks like he's almost done. Goodness, time really does fly. I should probably start paying more attention. There are at least a few things I want to try and nudge a little, if I can. Lord of the Ivory Throne, HM. Things on your end are starting that fast. Anthony stared at Carmen's message, momentarily caught off guard, and then typed, Lord of the Ivory Throne. One chapter wraps up and another one starts. I've got Soul helping with Gia's side of things, but that's not sorted yet. How far along is your situation? AAA City Ghost, Ein, is in the middle of creating a non-human intellect with Benjamin. AAA City Ghost, which is to say, Angela. Lord of the Ivory Throne, holy shit, that fast. Lord of the Ivory Throne, so what are you planning to do? What am I planning to do? Carmen glanced at Anthony's words in the stream chat, and smiled softly, then turned her attention back to the scene unfolding before her. Her formless soul drifted through the entire laboratory. By now, she had gradually expanded the range she could move within. With her nervous system as the anchor point, she could appear anywhere within the whole lab, peer into any corner she chose, though she still couldn't manifest a physical form. Simple back-and-forth conversation, however, she could now manage in fits and starts. Even if it was just a few words here and there, at least it was something. It had been so long since she'd had a proper conversation with Ein. In the end, she hadn't only pushed herself to the limit, she had, in a roundabout way, pushed Ein too. Otherwise, a man as cold and wooden as him would never have done so much, would he? Ah, she owed him so much. A selfish person like her, it was a walking contradiction, wasn't it? But then, make it up to him, little by little. Whichever side it was, she didn't want to abandon either. Because selfishness was just another word for wanting too much. She thought all of this with a quiet, self-deprecating amusement, and then opened the group chat again. AAA City Ghost has applied to inherit the stream. Host position. Original host Friarens Warrior of the Journey's End has approved the request in an instant. The stream transitioned without a cut. The picture in front of Anthony shifted abruptly to whatever Carmen could see. On screen, a laboratory. Shadowless surgical lights blazed all around. In the center stood a massive container filled with enkephalin, and inside it, the beautiful shape of a blue-haired woman was beginning, slowly, to take form. On either side of the container, two young men were hard at work. The one with black hair and golden eyes looked thoroughly exhausted. He typed data into the terminal in front of him while dictating to his assistant Benjamin. Note 24th iteration of the cognition model simulation. Based on Carmen's memories, the modules being simulated in this run are. The dictation went on for a long time. Benjamin dutifully recorded everything Ein said, and when it was finally done, he sat in silence for a moment, then lifted his head, and turned to look at this teacher of his, someone he knew well, and yet who somehow felt like a stranger now. Teacher, do you really think, if we keep going like this, we'll end up with what we're hoping for? Ein paused. He didn't answer. Keep recording. Teacher, you should know you can't bring her back. Benjamin couldn't help but furrow his brow. Even with all the admiration he held for Ein, he couldn't stop himself from saying it. All we're doing is creating a monster. A monster. Ein maintained his silence, then slowly raised his head, and looked at the machine before him. A machine. A machine built in Carmen's image. Ein didn't yet know what this machine should be called. Machines, perhaps, shouldn't have names. And yet he had already, long ago, settled on the name he hoped to give it. He paused his work for a moment, leaning back, and his mind drifted, unbidden, to the traces he had found not long ago. Cogito and enkephalin, consumed for no apparent reason in the environment around the tank. Cause unknown. Could that really have been you? Ein asked himself the question again, silently. But he couldn't arrive at an answer. Because after that, he had never found even the faintest trace of Carmen again. The hope had risen and vanished. It's fine. Keep going. After a moment, he sat back up and spoke in a voice of uncompromising severity that most people couldn't imagine sustaining. But right then, at Ein's ear, there came the sound of a soft, quiet sigh. It made his entire body go rigid all at once, enough that goosebumps rose across his skin. Because that sigh, it was far, far too familiar. Really haven't changed at all, have you? A voice murmured at his ear, helpless and a little exasperated. Ein's expression froze completely. And Carmen's soul settled into the empty chair beside him, and said it softly, just like that. Read more, Walnut-chan New History, Samsara Game, starting in the long dark with my waifus help us hit our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 75. Ein and Carmen's conversation, Jia, and Wang's reunion for K. 25-22 words. Professor. Benjamin, watching Ein from the side, spoke up in confusion. Should I keep recording the experimental data? Ein came back to himself, reflexively turning to look at Benjamin, but what he saw, behind Benjamin's shoulder, was the phantom of Carmen standing there, waving at him once before slowly dissolving into the air like smoke on the wind. It was only then, in that moment, that Ein finally snapped out of his daze with a sharp jolt. But the fog that followed was unavoidable. He rose to his feet and shook his head at Benjamin. Let's pause for now. I'm not in a good state. I need to step out and check whether I'm experiencing hallucinations, whether there are signs of enkephalin intake exceeding safe levels. We'll resume once everything is confirmed to be normal. He said it in his usual tone, then walked out through the laboratory door, all while Benjamin watched him with a look that was more than a little uneasy. He left the lab looking almost disheveled, drifting, slightly unmoored. Surrounded by blank white walls, he felt as though something in his mind had begun to come undone. What are you thinking right now? He asked himself that, lifting his head, and then, almost immediately, he noticed a faint pang of disappointment. Because there was no Carmen's face rising from the surface of the walls. What are you even thinking about? He took a slow breath, then began, with a mind that buzzed with restless irritation, to analyze what he had just seen. All right. Think it through, Ein. What exactly did you just experience? Was that Carmen? Could that have been Carmen? Was probably Carmen, wasn't it? But was it really her? Over and over, and yet in the end, it was always the same single question. And that one question had become the riddle that tormented him. At last, Ein ventured it quietly, almost tentatively. The soft greeting echoed in the corridor. Just as Ein was beginning to sink into disappointment, he heard the reply, I'm here. That voice, still ringing right beside his ear, and Ein's eyes went wide again in an instant. He looked up in disbelief, glancing all around him. He couldn't see Carmen anywhere, and yet the feeling was there, like she was standing just at the edge of perception. Are you really still here? He asked it in a voice that couldn't quite hold steady, a tremor in it that was, for Ein, extraordinarily rare. A scientist should not tremble like this. But right now, Ein couldn't stop himself. No answer came. Gradually, Ein's breathing slowed. After a long silence, he finally asked the question that had been sitting at the back of his throat. I don't know whether you're still there. But if you are, can you answer something for me? No longer waiting for an answer that might or might not come, no longer certain whether this was simply his frayed nerves manufacturing illusions, Ein pressed on. Am I doing the right thing? He asked it in a voice heavy with exhaustion. Giovanni is gone. Michelle is gone. So many people aren't here anymore. The ones still in this lab, me, Carly, Benjamin, Daniel, you can count us on one hand. Is what I'm doing now really the right thing? He waited for an answer. Though he didn't know what answer he was hoping for. Perhaps the question was only ever directed at himself. Nothing more. But the answer finally came. Do what you believe is right, Ein. In the void, Carmen's soul looked upon another soul, adrift and uncertain, and then, with a sigh, spoke in a way that was soft with comfort, just hold on to what you know. Because I know you can do it. So I believe in you. A long string of words, and for once, not a single one of them a question meant to cut. For an Ein like this, there was nothing left to reproach. In an instant, Ein was struck speechless. He felt himself, slowly, come back from the fog. He straightened his back, took one last look at the world around him. Do what you believe is right. He turned it over for a moment, then walked back into the laboratory. Professor, are you all right? Seeing Ein return, Benjamin turned his head and asked again. Ein gave a small nod. Let's keep going with the experiment. Still the same mind model import we hadn't finished. Benjamin asked it as a matter of routine, but those words, as it turned out, were enough to send Ein into silence. Still the same one. Ein found himself asking that question inside his own head. He looked up, as if doing so might let him see Carmen again. What I heard just now, was that your voice? There were many explanations. Enkephalin. Stress-induced cognitive distortion. Some unexplored mechanism of an originium art acting on his mind. And yet, Ein had never wanted so badly for it to truly have been Carmen's voice. Are you really still here? The 100 sins I committed in the name of one final good, is there really still a chance to atone for them? His lips moved slightly, as if he was turning something over in silence. Like a drowning man who has nearly given up, and then, in his last fading breath, catches sight of a single straw to grasp at. In the end, Benjamin looked on in astonishment as his teacher's face broke into a smile, a rare, self-mocking curl of the lips that almost never appeared. Atonement, huh? I'm sorry, what? Ein shook his head, answering Benjamin, discard the previous mind model. Abandon the import of Carmen's memory. Benjamin blinked, startled, then, once it registered, asked, how much? All of it. All of it. Throw out everything we have and start from scratch. Ein said it with the cold precision of an engineer. It won't take long. 3 days at the outside. Understood. Benjamin answered cleanly, but after a moment's hesitation, couldn't help but ask, then. Professor, may I ask why? The reason? At the very least, I can't let myself have regrets at the last moment. Ein considered for a moment, then gave that as his answer. If that really was you, then there's no longer any need for this. Ein turned his head, looking at the machines beside him, the thought passing through him in silence. No need to commit one more sin on top of the rest. Before that final good arrives, let the sins that come before it be just a little fewer. He covered his face with both hands. A moment later, everything inside him had settled. He gave a single, clean order. AAA City Ghost has ended the stream White Holy Throne, so what you're saying is White Holy Throne, and isn't going to jam your personality data straight into Angela and call it a day. No more instant noodle solution. Having watched the stream to its end, Anthony typed into the group chat with some surprise. AAA City Ghost, yep, that's right. See, told you I have a way with words. AAA City Ghost, a few sentences and it's handled. White Holy Throne, I mean. I won't comment on that. But given how things stand now, what happens to Angela once she's built? Thinking of the mechanical humanoid standing before Ein, the one that would one day become Angela, Anthony mulled it over, then typed, White Holy Throne. Don't tell me she's literally going to become your and Ein's daughter. AAA City Ghost. White Holy Throne, holy wait, so does that mean she's actually going to turn into a naive little mechanical kid? AAA City Ghost. AAA City Ghost, that's a warning. White Holy Throne, hey, relax, I'm not being weird about it. I don't have those kinds of worldly desires, you know. Anthony gave a wry smile as he typed. White Holy Throne, at most I just want to poach Angela to come work for me. In that regard, Anthony genuinely coveted the possibility. Every time he thought about Angela, a non-human intellect, an AI with unparalleled administrative and logistical capabilities, and imagined how, once his River Styx production line was up and running, she might even be able to help him plan the whole thing. His eyes lit up with want. Carmen, I'm just saying, given our friendship in this chat, couldn't you ask Ein to build me my own dedicated Angela model? That alone might knock out the conditions for upgrading my River Styx to level 3. But under Carmen's stern and unambiguous warning, Anthony ultimately let that idea go. Warrior of the Fallen Sound, speaking of which, this Ein fellow seems to carry quite a story with him. Warrior of the Fallen Sound. I have a strange feeling looking at him, like I'm seeing a glimpse of myself in there somehow. White Holy Throne, I'll reserve judgment on that one. Golden Spirit Founder, he really does seem like a man with a story. Though he looks complicated. Golden Spirit Founder, hard to tell what kind of person he is at first glance. White Holy Throne, Ein. Personally, I'd call him someone you can't quite pin down. White Holy Throne, a man where sin and atonement exist side by side, someone who walks through wrongdoing towards something that could be called redemption. That's my read on him. A genuinely singular kind of character. Let Night City burn, it's rare to see you speak so highly of someone, Anthony. White Holy Throne, of course, there's more to it than that. I'll be keeping a close eye on his estate, too. I don't even want to think about what that converts to in points. Let night city burn. White holy throne, ha, just kidding. Anthony typed that last line with a grin, then let his soul settle and slowly began to partition it. All right, enough spectating. He thought to himself with a quiet sigh. Relaxation always slipped away too quickly. He'd watched long enough, it was time to get back on track. Watching everyone else's stories was endlessly entertaining, and it made him nostalgic for a version of himself that had once been purely idealistic, untouched by any calculating interest, but a little nostalgia was all it was, and money still had to be made. Well then. Last up, my own tasks. Finish early, get one step closer to resurrection. Once I'm fully back, I'll finally be free, and then I can watch all the drama I want. He murmured that to himself, closed his eyes. The partitioned soul traveled along the angler's fishing line, and in an instant, plunged into the surging waves of the primordial river. Submerged. In the span of a single breath, through the gossamer thread of connection that was dimensional fishing, it sank into the current's edge and arrived, at last, within the avatar. And so, Avatar Pa opened his eyes once more. Inside the ancient temple, Pa slowly rose to his feet and stretched. Wang, who had been sitting nearby and brooding over an unfinished game of Go, noticed the shift in Anthony's presence and looked up. What are you getting up for? You were resting just fine. Wang set down a piece and asked idly, though paired with that characteristically gloomy expression of his, the words came out sounding vaguely like a lecture. Anthony couldn't help but pause, then let out a sigh. Second brother, you really need to work on that scowl of yours. If third sister sees you like this, she's going to have something to say about it again. You don't want her mistaking your jokes for you telling someone off, do you? Wang said nothing. He just went back to his game, ignoring the comment entirely. Stubborn as a rock. Looking at Wang, even Anthony was at a loss, and he waited until Wang had finished placing his piece before finally, in an unhurried tone, he replied, Don't worry, Jia's next awakening is probably still a ways off. Plenty of time to change before then. You keep pushing it back, one excuse after another, until there's nothing left to push it back to. All right, get up. Put down that pointless game. We've got work. Anthony shook his head with a helpless sigh and stepped over to Wang's side, giving him a tug. What is it? Wang, clearly starting to lose patience with the interruption, turned to ask. Anthony spoke up calmly, There's been progress. Sister Jia's resurrection, we've managed something, at least. The situation might not be exactly what you were expecting, but her condition has recovered somewhat. That got Wang's attention. He was on his feet in an instant, the game forgotten entirely, striding out 2 quick steps before realizing he had no idea where he was going. He turned back. Pa, which way? Just follow me. Anthony gave a mildly exasperated shake of his head, took Wang by the arm, and led him deeper into the ancient temple, to the place where Sister Jia's soul, gathered and condensed, had once taken the form of a calligraphic blade. But now, behind the spirit shrine that had long been steeped in offerings of incense, the spot where the blade had rested was empty. The blade was gone. Wang looked over and in that instant, felt a familiar ripple of soul energy, one that stirred something deep in him. I used a particular method to let her soul temporarily anchor to an object and manifest, for a time. It's a little hard to explain. Here, just look. Anthony said this as he pointed forward, and Wang finally saw it. Then he went quiet. Then he looked at Anthony. I understand the general principle, but what exactly is that? Anthony turned to glance at the object in question, a small, round, all-black dragon, like a little toy figurine, then cleared his throat twice. A dragon bubble. Wang opened his mouth. He seemed like he had something to say. But nothing came out. He stared at the small dragon bubble before him with the expression of a man questioning the fundamental nature of reality. Just as he was preparing to offer some kind of verdict on this, his pupils contracted sharply. And then he saw it, the soul taking shape, forming slowly, on the surface of the dragon bubble. Ah, second brother. And then, the soul of Jia turned toward Wang with a smile and said softly, I'm back. Walnut-chan new history, samsara game, starting in the long dark with my waifus. 100 power stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 76. The meeting of the Age family members with Jia. Jia's resurrection conditions for K 2570 words. Wang didn't speak for quite a while. It was only after a long stretch of silence, amid Jia's soft laughter, that he finally came back to himself. What's wrong? Can't even find the words. He stared at the face before him, so familiar in voice and expression, and after a long moment, asked quietly, You, this time. I can stay out as long as I like, Jia said, and smiled again, brilliant and warm. Wang instinctively moved to say something, but the words caught in his throat. In the end, he only turned his head away, which left Anthony thoroughly baffled. Look, if you want to chat with Jia, just chat, why are you looking at me? Anthony's dragon tail swept the floor with mild irritation, as he gave Wang a helplessly exasperated look. Do I have something written on my face? All right, second brother probably just doesn't know what to say. But there'll be plenty of days ahead to talk. This time it was he who, unusually, spoke first and spared Wang the awkwardness. I'll go call the others. Wang had been sitting there sputtering for a while. Finally he stood up, opened his mouth to say something, and caught Anthony's long-suffering glance. Sasuitai will adjust eventually, sure, but that's not the same as pretending they don't exist. Anthony looked at what Wang was about to do and couldn't help but add, just wait and see how they react when they find out. At the very least we have to call Big Brother over. Wang said urgently, then gradually stilled under his watchful gaze, his head slowly sinking. In his heart, just a moment ago, there had been a 10-alarm fire. As if he were terrified that this scene, if some sudden accident were to intervene, might shatter again like a bubble, vanishing without a trace. That and only that, was something Wang could not bear to live through again. So he had to act before anything could happen. Jia seemed to understand the urgency behind Wang's feelings, and the knot wound tight inside him. And so she spoke softly to soothe, It's all right. There will be time. I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere, not ever again. And, little 13, you'll have a way, won't you? Jia turned toward Anthony as she said it, eyes bright, smile warm. For a moment Anthony looked like he wanted to say something, and then thought better of it. But as Wang's urgent gaze swung his way, he turned it over for a beat and said, with some hesitation, A way, yeah, I've got one. It's just a bit of a pain. And Sasuitai is definitely still going to blow up. The fallout's going to be a headache to manage. The management I'll handle. Wang said it without a moment's pause, decisive, iron firm, brooking no argument. Fine. If you're going, go. Anthony let out a sigh, then called Wang back just as he was turning to leave. Hold on, don't rush off yet. Let's go over what comes next first. Wang froze. Then, slowly, he turned his head back and looked at Anthony with a slightly confused expression. Anthony, in turn, looked toward Jia. After the reanimation jutsu, what's the situation? Anthony asked. Jia considered for a moment, then said, broadly speaking, it's not bad. But what comes after is going to be a bit more complicated. The conditions for a full resurrection are now clear. At those words, Wang finally sat back down properly, leaning forward with an expression of rapt attention. Anthony glanced at him, and was briefly at a loss for words. Then he turned back to Jia and asked, The incense and faith side of things is on track, that's only a matter of time at this point. What are the remaining conditions? One is an authority. Jia said, We need something tied to an authority of the concept erasure type, a medium through which the resurrection can be channeled. Anthony thought for a moment, then gave Jia a nod, What else? That can't be all of it. Because that condition, relatively speaking, was actually quite achievable. An artifact that erased concepts, it sounded rare, but there was a Carmen from the city right there among the group chat members. A conceptual incinerator, anyone? Urban tech, endlessly impressive. Even better, he could probably wrangle the Tianshaxing blade in as a resurrection medium. If he set his mind to it, he'd find a way. But Anthony had a feeling that Jia's resurrection wouldn't be quite so simple. The biggest obstacle was probably still waiting ahead. As the question left Anthony's lips, Jia glanced at Wang. A beat later, her expression shifted into something reluctant, and she finally said, "The biggest problem is still figuring out how to deal with Nian. That's the most critical prerequisite for the resurrection." The instant the words were out of Jia's mouth, Wang was on his feet. Wordlessly, he started heading toward the back of the ancient temple. The plan to defeat Nian, shelved just a few days ago, or rather, merely slowed, immediately reignited into a frantic blaze of preparation. "Get back here." Not until Jia shot him a glare and called out sharply did Wang slink back, sitting down again in his seat like a deflated balloon. "How many times have I told you, stop thinking about trading yourself to Nian one-on-one? What would even be the point of that? Can't we find a solution where everyone comes out of it okay?" Jia sighed, scolding Wang, as Anthony watched him take the dressing down in silence, one hand on his own temple, while simultaneously turning the problem over in his head. "All right, stop arguing. The Nian situation has to be resolved eventually. If it really comes down to it, I'll figure something out." Still mid-scolding, Wang gave Anthony a strange look. He received, in return, a generous nod. "Yeah, me." Anthony said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Somebody's got to deal with it, so why not me? In fact, it really should be him. Ideally, definitely him. He didn't even want to think about how many points dealing with Nian might net him. That was money. Cold, hard points. And honestly, while one could technically handle the Nian situation down the line, Anthony felt that approach was, well, a little too expensive in the truest sense. That might have been the best move given those circumstances, but the circumstances were different now. Why keep using the old method? Think back on it, I actually think I'm better suited to handle Nian than either of you. Anthony said, and naturally, the memory of his past performances surfaced in Wang's mind, his own revival when they first met. And Jia's return from death. And though they'd spent so much time together now, Wang hadn't forgotten that the person standing before him was, in truth, not the agent of Nian. Was it actually possible he was better suited for this than Wang himself? "I keep telling you, stop thinking about just blowing it up. The efficiency is terrible, and there's zero return on investment." "Then what's your plan?" Wang frowned and directed the question at Anthony. Anthony answered with an enigmatic smile. "I've just been thinking about one thing. Something that big, waking back up, it's going to need a lot of energy, right?" He said it in a measured, faraway tone, as if gazing at a gold mine that would never run dry. The primordial originium. The three concepts linked together in Anthony's mind, eventually resolving into a single idea, a super resource node. One that, once tapped, could generate a never-ending stream of points. A child would weep with envy. He cleared away the noise rattling around in his head, and looked back at Wang. "Anyway, leave this one to me. Compared to all the years you've been waiting, the time I'll need is negligible." He said it casually, then continued. "So keep waiting a little longer. Jia's resurrection, I'll handle it. Then it's in your hands. If you need help with anything, just say the word." "Actually, there is something." Anthony's response came in the very next instant, the warmth of someone watching a volunteer enthusiastically sign up for overtime. "The pressure from Sasuotai and the True Dragon, I'll leave that side of things to you. The temple at its current scale isn't going to cut it anymore. Time to expand. You can handle that, right?" Anthony glanced at his artificer skill tree with barely concealed delight as he asked. Wang opened and closed his mouth. He even found himself, despite everything, beginning to wonder whether what he'd just said had been the right call. But in the end, he let out a sigh, walked over to his chessboard and said, "I'll figure something out." He picked up a piece. Among the many pieces the grand flame had set across the board, a small handful began to move, fanning out toward the various Nian fragments. I'm going to contact the other brothers and sisters. What exactly is your method? Wang looked at Anthony and asked. Anthony's fingertips rippled faintly. In the void, it was as if a fishing line had drawn a line across still water, and then, in Anthony's hand, a cluster of beacons materialized. Take these, hand one to each of them. He bundled the whole lot into Wang's arms and then looked up, gazing into the distance. He shook his head. He'd just remembered that he was, nominally at least, the 13th member of the Nian family now, and had yet to meet any of them in person. Anthony turned it over quietly, then looked at Jia. Finally, he shrugged. Anyway, Jia, go catch up with everyone properly. And then he produced another beacon and asked, out of nowhere. Ready to board the Stygian boat. In the great wilderness city of Dahuang, between the ridges of farmland, among 10,000 mu of golden straw, Shu stood in the water, gazing into the distance. Then he saw Wang walking slowly toward him. His brow furrowed. Second brother, what brings you here? Shu looked at Wang and asked, a note of surprise in his voice. Wang didn't answer. He simply raised his hand and held out the beacon. Jia is back. Then the piece said what it needed to say and dissolved in the wind, leaving only Shu standing there, staring at the beacon in his hand. In a daze. Atop Yuman Pass, a grandmaster of his age. He turned his head and frowned at a piece standing a little farther off. Then he sighed. Come here. Stop standing so far away. What did you need? The piece didn't answer either. It handed off the beacon cleanly and vanished on the spot. Use lingering flavor house in Baijiao. How did second brother send me something? Go see your Jia. The piece looked at you, hesitated for a long moment, and then, in a manner quite unlike its usual character, said. Everyone will be coming. Shangshu within. And more places still. The piece wandered through more places than could be counted, delivering a beacon each time, and leaving behind the same message. Given the trouble with Sasuotai these past weeks, I couldn't invite you to the ancient temple for a gathering. But now I can, so please come. Come and be together, because something has happened that is worth being together for. Or rather, in 100 years, there may be nothing more joyful than this. And so in the cabin of the Stygian boat, the phase transfer engine blazed with brilliant light. The primordial river seemed to ripple for just a brief moment. Then this world received 10 visitors. Chongyue was the first to open his eyes. He took in the layered corridors before him, turned his head, and looked around. Then, one by one, his brothers and sisters appeared at his side. He frowned. Where's number 10? Fong was the first one whose whereabouts were asked after. After a brief, shared silence, everyone arrived at the same answer. Nowhere to be found. Chongyue rubbed his temples, head aching, and tried again. Then where's Wang? Second brother handed me something, and then just left. No idea where he went. Yu shook his head, speaking. He was still holding a large, very full-looking box. It looked quite heavy. That guy, he probably just went off and hid in some corner somewhere. Gathers everyone up, says third sister's woken up, and then vanishes himself. Same as ever. Ling shook his head with helpless resignation, unable to stifle a sigh. All 9 agents were here. For the agents, this was already a rare reunion. For a moment, Yu the 12th, looked out at the scene, and felt a long breath of relief escape from somewhere deep in his chest. Like a stone, long held, finally setting down. The other agents perhaps felt it too. For them, a gathering like this was something that came along only once in a great while. Though admittedly, the current situation was full of unanswered questions. Still, a lot had been happening lately. For instance, everyone had heard the news that the family had gained a 13th member. None of those present, save Chongyue, had yet met them in person. But for the people of the Nian family, family was family. Once you were in it, siblings were siblings, recognized without reservation. The same held true for Wang. His way of doing things could be baffling. His personality was genuinely difficult to put into words. And just now he had, without explanation, brought everyone to some unknown place. But faced with all of that, they still chose to trust Wang. They'd taken the beacon in hand, and come here carrying their hopes. If only one more person could also be here, that would be enough. Seemingly all struck by the same thought at the same moment, everyone fell quiet. Each one of them, in their heart, anxious, tense, and hopeful all at once. In the end, it was you who spoke first, asking carefully, "Should we go look for Jia first?" Second brother said she was alive, said he was bringing us here to see her. But now we can't find him anywhere, and we still need to find Jia. So where would she even be? And as that question rose from among the gathered, as if to answer it directly, there in the cabin of the Stygian boat, before them all, a great door swung open of its own accord. And through the doorway stepped the so-called he, appearing before everyone, and amid their astonished silence, she broke into a smile. Then, softly, she spoke, "Everyone, I'm back. Plus 40 ch, Walnut Chan new history, Samsara game, starting in the long dark with my waifus, let's achieve our community goals, 100 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody." Chapter 77, The Grand Gathering of the Sway Family Members, Singularity Product, a glass window for K 2806 words. A brief hush fell over the room, a moment of still silence. Even those who had already known the truth found themselves struck dumb when it finally became real, unfolding right there in front of everyone. Then the silence shattered, and what burst through in its place was a wave of joy, bright and full of welcome. You rushed ahead of everyone else, calling out her name with barely contained delight, but the next instant, she lurched forward and passed right through, her arms closing on empty air, her body cutting clean through Jia. Jia turned to her with a helpless smile and said softly, I'm only a soul right now, I can't hug you back the way I used to. We'll save that for later." You blinked, then looked at Jia, who thought for a moment before adding, "But I won't be leaving again. And coming back for real, that's only a matter of time." You broke into a grin and gave a firm nod. The rest of the operators came forward. Ling gave her wine gourd a shake in Jia's direction and said, "What a shame, though, I was looking forward to having a proper drink with you. A rare occasion like this calls for it." "We'll get to that later, Ling Jia. And you really should watch yourself, don't go overboard," Jia said with a resigned look. Then she caught Jun's gaze and gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. "Congratulations, Jia." He pressed his hands together in a mock bow, teasing her with a grin that he was using to cover the emotion welling up in his chest, and the stinging at the tip of his nose, and then he felt a smack land squarely on his back. He spun around to find that it was Ji who'd hit him, and for a moment, he forgot all about being sentimental. What was that for? Ji opened her mouth, closed it, and thought hard. She certainly wasn't going to admit that she'd gotten swept up in the moment and reflexively smacked number 8. Finally, she said, "I was going to say that first." Yi's eyes went wide. He pointed at Ji, then pointed at himself, and what followed next was exactly the kind of scene everyone had come to expect from those two. Watching the two of them bicker and scuffle, Jia let out an involuntary laugh. Then she noticed that Shu had come to stand beside her, and the two of them watched E and Ji go at it together. "Feels familiar now, doesn't it, third sis?" Shu turned to Jia with a grin. Jia laughed and nodded. "Waking up to everyone making a ruckus like this, it's really something. And knowing E, he'll probably come running over to you later to tattle on Ji. Whether Ji actually did anything or not is a whole other question. It really has been so long since I've seen everyone like this." As she spoke, a smile settled over her face. She glanced over toward the back of the group where she was hanging well behind everyone else, and gave her a little wave, only to watch her shrink back even further. Jia wasn't quite sure what to do with that. In the end, Nian gave she a firm push from behind and sent her stumbling to the front. She twisted around to glare at Nian's grinning face, and her irritation flared up all over again. But Jia was already looking at the two of them, looking for a long moment, and at last, let out a slow breath. Long time no see, she. Long time no see, third sis. She dropped her head and murmured back. Jia answered warmly, and before long, Nian was cheerfully herding she around again until she finally hissed at her, and only then did Nian stop. It was then that Jia finally looked up and met Chongyue's gaze. Third sister. You weren't here last time I came, good to finally see you in person. Chongyue said it with a quiet smile. Jia smiled back in kind. Then Chongyue paused, turned something over and spoke, speaking of which, where exactly are we? This is 13's place. He calls it the Mingzhou. Jia brushed a strand of hair back and continued. While we're here, you don't need to worry about sway matters or Sasuotai for the time being. Sasuotai might come asking questions eventually, but not here. And as 13 said, if anyone wants to come by and gather in the future, this place will be available. He's setting aside a few rooms specifically for everyone to rest in. Thoughtful of him. But if this is his place, where is he? And where's Wang? Chongyue exhaled and glanced around with a searching look. Jia considered for a moment, then smiled. Want me to take everyone to find them? Meanwhile, far removed from the warmth filling the ship's cabin, Anthony, inhabiting his stand body, sat across a go-board in a quiet side room, staring at the game for a long moment. Then he looked at the white stones Wang had demolished beyond all recognition, pushed the board away, and said with flat exasperation, You could be in there reuniting with your family, and instead you dragged me in here to play Go. What is wrong with you? Wang said nothing, simply placed one final stone to officially end the game, then finally looked up and gave Anthony a proper look. You're the same. You're not out there with them either. You're the one who told me there was a quiet room in here. Can't a man fish in peace? Anthony shot back immediately, but then he pressed his fingers to his brow and sighed. Forget it. I'm not playing another round with you. Go board's trash. I'm going fishing. You can fish here. Not quite the way you're imagining. Anthony said it with an expression that was hard to read. Honestly, now that this game was done, Anthony had been planning to disappear quietly. This stand avatar of his wasn't in any trouble, and dropping in on a Sway family gathering wasn't forbidden, but he was an outsider, a barely known borrowed face. Waltzing into someone else's reunion under those circumstances would kill the mood. As for Wang, though, that was more complicated. Anthony looked up at him, and his eye twitched. Honestly. You are being incredibly awkward about this. He gave the silent, brooding Wang a flat look and said. I'm not comfortable around them either, Wang said at last, breaking his silence. The big moment right now is Jia reuniting with everyone. I don't want to sour the mood. Translation, you're scared to go. Anthony gave him a look. At least I've got something resembling an excuse. Stop dressing up your nerves in noble reasoning. Just say you're scared, say you don't want to. Why do you need so many layers on it? After he said it, Anthony let out a long, helpless sigh. Wang turned the stone over in his fingers, sat in silence for a while, and finally exhaled. Maybe you're right. How does the fishing work? Teach me if you've got the time. Won't be idle much longer. Something seemed to reach Anthony, some faint sense of it, and he paused, then shook his head. Wang stared at him for a moment, then looked toward the door. The next instant, they heard hurrying footsteps in the corridor outside. Come on, I know those two are definitely in here. A familiar voice rang out, bright with excitement, nothing like its usual calm. Wang startled on instinct, then turned to look at Anthony. But Anthony had already gotten to his feet, and was quietly backing toward the wall, wearing a smile that was directed squarely at Wang. Enjoy yourself. That's all I'll say. Wang hadn't even had time to say anything before the door burst open with a kick, and a voice rang out, Get out here. It was as though some instinct rooted deep in his blood suddenly made itself known. Wang's head snapped around, and there they were, 10 operators, with Chongyue at the lead and Long Pao Pao cradled in her arms, pouring through the doorway all at once. Jia's soul drifted to his side first, and fixed him with a look that was doing its best to be stern. You are unbelievable, second brother. Everyone has been looking for you. We said reunion, how does a reunion work with someone missing? Come on, move it, you's going to cook for everyone. What are you doing hiding in a closet? Say something. Chongyue gave a short bark, and before Wang could put together any kind of protest, Ji and Yi had each grabbed one of his arms, and were physically hauling him out the door at a run. At that moment, Jia turned and looked over at Anthony, blinking. Can I borrow one of the rooms? Anthony smiled back. Of course. The rooms in the lower cabin aren't in use yet, they're free for whatever you need. Then you're coming too. Jia said it warmly and cheerfully, and Anthony blinked, then let out an awkward laugh and took half a step back. Maybe I'll sit this one out. I should go check how David's work is coming along. You're coming. You're 13 of the Sui family now, did you forget? Jia said it with a smile. Anthony paused for a long moment, and in the end, seemingly unable to find a single usable comeback, he let out a quiet sigh, and then, with a helpless nod, followed Jia and the others into a large room. And so 2 unresurrected dead men stood just outside the circle, watching as everyone threw themselves into the work around them. You set up the cookware she'd brought and arranged the ingredients. She went to help her. Ji and Yi were on the other side of the room, bickering loudly as they wrestled a table into place. She was sitting to one side being pestered by Nian, wearing the expression of someone who had given up on life, her eyes drifting around the room taking in the scene. Ling was drinking, laughing loudly and pointing at someone across the room, and then all of a sudden, Nian's voice came out in a yell. Who's playing the kazoo? Anthony, watching all of this, finally lost his composure and laughed. Then he turned, and found Jia's smile right there beside him. Take a rest, now and then. Jia glanced at Anthony and said it lightly. You've been doing a lot. Everyone in the group can see it. It's not that I'm tired, though. Anthony shook his head, started to say something, then stopped, and at that moment, she appeared right in front of him, as though she'd spotted something worth tormenting and locked on hard. After a long moment of staring, she suddenly said, You're 13, right? Yeah, that's me. Call me Jia Jia. She puffed out her cheeks, holding his gaze as if she was psyching herself up for something. Before Anthony could even answer, Jia had already started laughing. I'm not really used to calling anyone Jia Jia, to be honest. Anthony shook his head with a helpless look. And honestly, you should work on that shut-in habit of yours first before you start demanding things. Doesn't matter. Call me Jia Jia. She grumbled, and just then, Yu's voice rang out across the room as she hoisted up a pot. Food's ready. It's not New Year's yet, but come eat, it's a reunion dinner. There was laughter, teasing, noise in all directions as everyone found their seats. When the Sui operators had all settled in around the table, Anthony got swept along with the current and ended up in a seat too, planted right between Yu and Jia. How are you feeling? Jia turned and asked. Anthony thought about it. Then he gave a quiet sigh. If I'm being honest, it's not bad, actually. He said it, and found that a smile had found its way to his face. I don't have much experience with things like this. But thinking it over, I can't say it's bad at all. Just treat it like home. Same as in the group. Jia said that, and Anthony gave a small nod, still smiling. I'll do my best. Once everyone's back, especially once I'm back. He thought to himself. After all, once he was back, he'd need a life of his own, wouldn't he? If he was only coming back for the sake of coming back, there wouldn't be much to look forward to. He'd need things, relationships, that he could enjoy and lean on once he was alive again. Something to hope for when that day finally came. And wasn't this already pretty good? Anthony watched the sway operators laughing, squabbling, making their usual mess, and at last, he smiled for real. I suddenly feel a lot more motivated to chase that resurrection. In the end, with you watching him expectantly, he lifted his chopsticks, picked up a bite, and put it in his mouth. How's the cooking? Anthony looked over the full table, the dishes, the bright expressions on everyone's faces, and took a moment before he answered. I haven't had much, but I imagine it's wonderful. Still can't taste anything, huh? He chewed on flavorless food, and let the thought settle inside him. This was only a stand body. No sense of taste. And his true self was a soul, no sense of taste there either. Resurrection. I really do need to come back. Sitting there at the gathering, thinking of the joy that waited on the other side of revival, all the ordinary things a living person could enjoy that were still beyond his reach, Anthony felt his resolve sharpen. Then he watched as Wang, somewhere in the middle of everyone's noise and laughter, finally seemed to let something go, a long, slow release, and quietly became part of it. Anthony chewed his tasteless food and glanced sideways at Jia. Happy with how it turned out. Getting to see everyone like this, truly rare. It was worth the trip. Jia nodded, then turned to Anthony. Thank you. I should be the one saying thank you. Anthony shook his head, narrowed his eyes, and looked out across the Sway family. Things are going to be a lot more convenient on the Grand Flame side from here on out. He had plenty of feelings about the warmth in the room right now, but at the end of the day, he still needed to figure out how to turn this into points. He'd made the connection. When it was time to reach out again, he could ask for help. Things are slowly getting better. So Anthony sat there, running the numbers in his head, and waited out the rest of the gathering. Before he knew it, every dish on the table had been cleared. Everyone gathered their things, made promises to meet again next time, and then, just ahead of the incoming storm that would be Sasuotai's reaction, phase teleported back to their respective beacon points. For his part, Anthony had the stand body escort Wang and Jia back to the ancient temple. The brief gathering was over. Anthony, seated on the toilet, finally opened his eyes and let out a long breath. He'd managed to sort out his own affairs, at least. With any luck, the Grand Flame side would be getting a few more temples added to the network soon. Come to think of it, I haven't checked the group chat in a while. That thought brought him to open the group chat, and the moment he did, he saw David's frantic stream of it mentions from over an hour ago. Let Night City burn at White Holy Throne. I caught something. I caught something. Let Night City burn, I got a bite. I actually got a bite. Let Night City burn has shared an item screenshot item Singularity Technology Artifact a glass window White Holy Throne. White Holy Throne, holy what the hell did you fish up? Went more. Walnut-chan new history, Samsara game, starting in the long dark with my waifus. Let's reach these milestones together. 100 power stones equals +1 free chapter for all readers. Chapter 78. Heading to the Moon G world, the meteor plunging into the city. Anthony 4K. 20 for 52 words. White Holy Throne, huh? Wait, hold on. Staring at the message David had posted in the group chat, Anthony immediately fired off a triple take of bewilderment, his pupils practically earthquake ing. In the end, 1,000 words collapsed into a single punctuation mark. White Holy Throne. Let Night City burn. Anthony, does this count as fishing talent on my part? For a moment Anthony was at a complete loss for words. His rational mind said, yes. Absolutely, undeniably, spectacularly yes. But the fisherman buried deep in his subconscious said, average, I'm not jealous at all, not even a little. After a long silence, he finally typed back. White Holy Throne, beginner's luck. That's all. White Holy Throne, you got it wrong. Where exactly were you when you reeled it in? Let Night City burn, huh? Oh, I didn't keep track of that. Does it matter? White Holy Throne, didn't keep track. Well, forget it then. Remember to note it down next time. White Holy Throne, ahem, anyway, back to the actual topic. Having reined the conversation back in from its tangent, Anthony sent a trade request to David. You have received, Singularity product glass window. Grand Flame wordsmith, by the way, what exactly is this thing? Jia, who had just returned to the continent of Terra, sent this thoroughly baffled message. White Holy Throne, oh, this. In a certain sense, it's the thing that could give the big bro his second phase directly, and send Nian screaming awake in the middle of the night. Grand Flame wordsmith. White Holy Throne, ahem, forget that. Simply put, the glass window is a tool for observing and having conversations with the different possibilities of one's own existence. White Holy Throne, it's an urban exclusive technology called Singularity Tech. Carmen should be pretty familiar with it, though the glass window itself probably hasn't appeared in your timeline yet, right? AAA City Ghost, that's right. It's a singularity technology that has never had a patent filed in the city. White Holy Throne, an even simpler way to think about it, treat it as a tool for observing your parallel worlds, with a few minor differences. Grand Flame wordsmith, is it just observation? Or conversation only? White Holy Throne, not exactly. In theory, it's possible to directly extract that possibility and load it as a deployable personality. White Holy Throne, the catch is that the glass window version's functionality is a bit unstable, and its energy requirements are probably enormous. Honestly, the moment Anthony saw this glass window, the thought had crossed his mind, pull out Shuo Qiao right then and there, and give Nian a good ghost story. But after thinking it over carefully, Anthony could only reluctantly abandon that tantalizing idea. He had no doubt whatsoever that he genuinely could extract Shuo Qiao's personality. The problem was, how much energy would that take? In other words, how many points would that cost? Maybe worth experimenting with down the road, but definitely not something he and the others could handle right now. White Holy Throne, alas, farewell for now, my Shuo Qiao bro, my demon rabbit. I'll come for you once I'm rich. Konoha's yellow flash. What is this guy even on about? White Holy Throne, ahem, anyway, at Grand Flame wordsmith, the major hurdles for your resurrection should now be sorted out. The only remaining gap is points. White Holy Throne, though, that particular gap might be a little on the large side. Even as he typed it out, Anthony couldn't help feeling a little helpless about it himself. Looking at the current rate of point inflation, his gut told him, without 1,000,000 points, pulling off the Shuo Qiao elbowing Nian plan was probably a pipe dream. And so, after going around in circles, they were right back where they started. Coach, what do you do when you're broke again? White Holy Throne, after all that, the core issue still comes back to earning points. White Holy Throne, the way things stand, Jia is actually the closest one to being resurrected. White Holy Throne, it's just that this point gap is genuinely awkward. White Holy Throne, I'm starting to think I seriously need to come up with a proper money-making plan. After typing that out, Anthony once again sank into helpless contemplation. Same old problem. The scale of his current income streams just wasn't cutting it. The ritual earnings had the Demon Slayer and Grand Flame sides feeding in, and his own contributions kept trickling through, but it was still small change in the grand scheme of things. The big haul came from raiding Arasaka Tower, and he'd scraped together a bit more from the Naruto side, but a stable, large-scale source of points remained frustratingly out of reach. Grand Flame was undeniably an excellent option, but without resolving the Nian Beast situation, how could he possibly farm there in any serious volume? The Naruto timeline had also stalled for now. When all was said and done, it seemed only one option was left. White Holy Throne at AAA City Ghost. AAA City Ghost, what's up? White Holy Throne, let's go rob the executive. AAA City Ghost. White Holy Throne, ahem, not serious, let me rephrase that. White Holy Throne, right now, the issue most people are running into is a shortage of points. The only solution I can think of is Lobotomy Corporation. Given the current size of the group, it was probably the only viable path. Anthony had many thoughts about Lobotomy Corporation. Up until now, the somewhat awkward problem of Galleon had kept him from pushing the lobotomy route too aggressively. But faced with this dead end on both sides, Anthony finally clenched his jaw and decided to just try his luck over at Lobotomy Corporation. So what if it's the executive? Let's just blow her up. After all, no matter how you looked at it, Lobotomy Corporation was genuinely loaded. In this current bind, it was worth every bit of effort Anthony could throw at it. Once the Galleon problem was resolved, the road ahead with lobotomy would be wide open. Even just skimming money directly from lobotomy would probably net a substantial haul. And after Galleon's death, Lobotomy Corporation would ignite the smoke war, a conflict blanketing nearly half the city, and a war fortune ripe for the taking. More importantly, Anthony had also set his sights on lobotomy's singularity, mind manifestation. If he could manage it more cleanly, setting up a branch of Lobotomy Corporation right there on his Styx vessel. Anthony turned the idea over in his mind, mapping out future plans, and finally let out a long breath. One way or another, pushing forward through the city's storyline was an absolute necessity now. Including the Seed of Light launch later on, he'd need to get a hand in that too. After all, Anthony was fairly certain it was tied to Carmen's resurrection. And conveniently, the glass window he'd just received might actually come in useful during the upcoming lobotomy trip. Perfect timing to put it to good use. At that thought, a smile spread across Anthony's face. He remembered it clearly. After the future Seed of Light launch, Carmen had ascended directly to become a multiversal ghost, capable of observing and even interfering with any possibility. Terrifyingly powerful. But what if, right now, he let Carmen use the glass window to try making contact with those other possibilities? All in all, this trip to lobotomy had enormous potential. White Holy Throne, alright then, let's just go with that. White Holy Throne at AAA City Ghost, I'll spin up a new stand right now and then head over. AAA City Ghost, coming now. I don't have any objections. AAA City Ghost, just do be careful. You know what the lab situation is like. AAA City Ghost, just don't get cut down by Carly the second you land. White Holy Throne, LMAO White Holy Throne, it won't come to that, will it? Anthony typed back with mild uncertainty, thought about it for a moment, and then gave up thinking about it. He opened his angler skill tree, glanced at his remaining balance of 300,000 points, and took a slow, deep breath. The Hades armor still wasn't built, but at this rate, there might not be enough funds for it anyway. Better develop at lobotomy first, then deal with it afterward. As for right now, what he needed to do next was self-evident. He opened the dimensional fishing stand from within, and found something that surprised him. It seemed that because his soul strength had reached 10 and risen to 14, dimensional fishing had grown alongside his soul itself. Simply put, the creation of his next angler individual would have considerably fewer requirements, and could even carry some of his own soul's divine aspects along with it. Well, that's a nice bonus. Anthony raised an eyebrow. Without much deliberation, he activated his third angler individual. And before him, once again, a humanoid figure appeared, one bearing a striking resemblance to his own face. This time, however, the figure carried something different, a flowing, iridescent quality about them, like the shifting colors of the primordial river itself. The complexion looked otherwise normal, but along the veins on the back of the hands, light streamed and shimmered, suffused with deep, swirling hues. Was this an inheritance of his own earthbound spirit traits? Hard to say what the specific effects would be. Anthony paused in thought for a moment, then once again divided a fragment of his soul, and settled it into the avatar before him. Then came the naming. What should I call this one? Anthony looked out beyond the Styx vessel, at the iridescent primordial river flowing past. Since he was heading to the city, the name ought to have at least some urban flavor to it. With that thought in mind, Anthony deliberated briefly, and then bestowed a name upon the figure. You'll be called Prometheus. Now then, head to the outskirts of the city. To the lab. Requesting world traversal target, the city. AAA City Ghost has approved this world traversal request detection. City timeline is currently at a critical juncture. Issuing emergency support mission. Emergency support mission, Angel Investor mission requirements. Assist group member Carmen in completing and witnessing the establishment of Lobotomy Corporation within the laboratory. Note, this is one of the conditions for Carmen's resurrection. Mission reward, 200,000 points. Functional world positioning unlocked with the emergency support mission appearing. Anthony felt the powerful sensation of world traversal washing over him. But this time, it felt unfamiliar, different from every time before. If previous traversals were like getting ambushed with a blackjack, then this one had a far more explosive quality to it. It felt exactly as though he'd been launched by a truck, and was now streaking through the sky like a meteor. That instant brought with it an even more violently disorienting sensation, the kind that made Anthony feel profoundly, thoroughly unwell. Chat group. Can you not use a normal method of transport next time? And so, like a falling star, Anthony hurtled downward toward the city. At that same moment, in the outskirts, inside the laboratory. Almost finished, is it? Ein looked at Angela, lying peacefully within the capsule before him, and spoke. At his side, Benjamin gave a nod. We're not far from completion now. All that's left is to input the final piece of the mind model data. But Professor, are you certain this is all right? If you're asking about breaking the taboo, didn't we establish a contingency for that before we ever started? Ein turned back to ask Benjamin, and Benjamin paused, seeming for a moment as though he wanted to say something but couldn't quite find the words. No, Professor. You know that's not what I mean. Finally, he shook his head and spoke. I mean abandoning the import of Carmen's memories. Ein was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to look at Angela in the capsule, as if lost in thought. I think Angela is a beautiful name, Benjamin. He finally said, Carmen's memories, there's no need to include them. I won't regret that. After all, the voice he'd heard that day. No, he couldn't even be certain whether that fleeting voice had been real or a hallucination. He hoped it hadn't been a hallucination. But either way, as long as there was even that faint sliver of hope, there was no longer any need to burden Angela with expectations like those. He had already committed enough sins. The act of building Angela itself was one of them, no need to add yet another on top. He thought this, wearily, and in the end tucked his hands into the pockets of his lab coat, turned, and walked out. I'm going to step out for a bit. I'll be right back. He said it, then left the research room and stepped outside. He crossed paths with Carly in the corridor, exchanged a brief greeting, then walked out of the lab altogether and into the open expanse of the outskirts. The weather in the outskirts was unstable, and even time seemed erratic here. By now the starry sky was already visible overhead. Ein shook his head. The city's sky had always been something city dwellers paid no attention to, neither willing nor inclined to look up at it. But tonight, Ein found himself, as if guided by some inexplicable impulse, tilting his head back, for reasons even he couldn't explain, to gaze up at the distant stars. And then, he saw something that stopped him cold. High up in that vast sky, amid the infinite field of stars, he could just barely make out one of those stars falling. The next moment, he realized it was no hallucination. Among the stars, a single streak of light was cutting straight across the sky, a meteor plummeting down. It grew larger and larger, closer and closer, until, right there before Ein's stunned gaze, it struck the ground roughly 2 kilometers away. Staring at the distant plume of smoke that showed no sign of settling, Ein stood there dumbstruck. Wait a moment. What had he just seen? Walnut Chan for more chapters. New history, Samsara game, starting in the long dark with my waifus help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 universal bonus chapter. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.